Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Two Guys and a Kaiju. I'm your host, King Goji.
And I'm your co-host, Godzuki.
Yes.
We're back.
We are back.
Technically episode 2, because the intro's the intro.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, episode 3? Episode 2?
Let's just say episode 2.5.
Okay, episode 2.5. This is, however, part 2
yes.
of our 3-part
series.
Deep dive into Godzilla, the 1954 film.
Correct. Which you haven't seen all of yet.
I know. I have actually done a little bit more homework than you are prepared for. Oof. But I still haven't seen the entirety of this film.
Well, you need to.
Bits and pieces.
Get to it.
I know. I have done some research.
That's good.
My knowledge does not match that of
the master here. Yes, I know.
Of you, King Goji. You're the master.
It's all good.
I'm just the humble learner.
You're just the
subject.
Yeah, you're just the.
I'm a peasant.
No, you're the lab experiment. Is what you are.
That's true. I represent everybody else who's not super familiar with kaiju.
No, you'll be fine. We'll just cut off a leg if you don't watch it.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, in the story of Godzilla, like there's just a minimal destruction and damage.
Some burn victims, some arms are thrown in. That's all right. They
nothing
get crushed.
crazy.
Yeah, nothing too bad.
Nothing too bad. Yeah.
Nothing too bad. No.
Okay, so last time we left off, kind of talking about just an overview of Godzilla, like
correct. Yes.
Some of our personal experiences with it, how much it means to you.
Yep.
But this episode, we want to actually dive into the overview of the story, the plot of the movie.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about like what that generally looks like. So if you want to start us off, King Goji,
it'll be my pleasure.
Let's give the audience a little taste of what
the original.
The original.
Okay. So generally, everyone kind of, for most people who are used to Godzilla, they watch the U.S. cut. But the original vision for the first Godzilla was. Bless his soul and may he live forever in our hearts. Ishiro Honda is known for before Godzilla, he was known for his comedy and love movies.
Really?
Yes. Ishiro Honda was very much into tragic love stories and
no way.
And comedies, yes. And that's how he got the job for Godzilla. Because of his theatrical work. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I was just going to say, so the guy who's making this iconic monster film before was making comedies and love stories.
Correct.
That's so interesting. So
yes.
like Godzilla has the potential to kind of go a lot of different routes.
Yes.
Which we'll see in later films.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
and it had every Honda film if you are very interested in Honda's direction or in his films, there's a social message in a lot of his films.
Yeah, so the guy was no stranger to putting underlying meaning
there's no shine away from anything he wrote. And most of the movies he did, he wrote the screenplay. He was very responsible. He's a very creative man, and I think he had really good taste. His wife Kimi Honda also was a big part of that whole story. She would read the script for the female characters and the male characters of the story, and she would give her approval because she was once an actress. So she knew kind of the game plan. How he started the film was, he was actually, Godzilla came out of nowhere. It was just an idea. Someone was on an airplane, and the producer, Tanaka, really had the vision of a monster from the ocean being attacked by atomic weapons. So the plot was that these fishing boats were being attacked by a monster in the ocean. Very similar to a movie that had just come out the year before, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And so, anyway, that's a whole nother story entirely. But basically, the whole point of his initial story was that this monster was going to be a whale and a gorilla. So Gojira is the two words of gorilla and whale.
In Japanese.
In Japanese, correct.
Wow.
So he came up with the idea, and as time went on, the monster developed, and now and then eventually they dropped Gojira in international in Japan. It's now Godzilla. So when they were marketing it overseas, it was just Gojira. So
Godzilla is a monster whale
gorilla.
Gorilla.
Originally, because a lot of Japanese didn't know a lot about monsters at this time. It was mostly King Kong. The special effects director at the time, Eiji Tsuburaya, was a huge fan of Kong. He had his personal copy of it at his home. So he really wanted a King Kong movie, but they didn't have the rights to King Kong, so they couldn't do it.
So they had to go their own direction.
They had to go their own direction, do their own monster. And so Eiji Tsuburaya, the great special effects wizard, who basically pioneered a lot of the Japanese monster flicks or kaiju flicks in Japan, cleared his schedule for the few months of filming, and he did a lot of the work. He was in an inn with the rest of the writers and the producer, and he basically had a hand in the story as well. The designs were his idea. The burns on the skin were his ideas. It was inspired by the ship that was accidentally, in a testing zone, part of Operation Bravo, which they were testing hydrogen bombs. It was a fishing boat called Lucky Dragon Number 7.
Incredible.
So that's what started the Godzilla story, and so the plot developed from that.
Right, which basically the movie opens up. There's a storm.
No. That's towards the middle.
Okay.
So how the story starts out is there's a ship. They're a fishing frigate, I guess. They're on the ocean, and then there's bright light in the water shows up.
Oh yeah.
And they all go blind, and the ship sinks. Not until I'm not going to spoil the film, guys, so don't worry. Then we get to the part you're talking about a little later. But basically, we lose 17 ships in this film before they actually do something.
Right. It takes a while before Godzilla actually appears.
He doesn't appear. He doesn't appear till absolutely middle of the film.
Yeah.
So.
Which by the time he appears, I actually did some research. This first appearance is this like animatronic hand puppet.
He is a hand puppet, correct.
So he's not always a guy in a suit.
No. There is a little stop motion as well.
Which is incredible to me.
Yeah, it's a combination of puppet, suit action, and stop motion.
I think that's what hit me when I was watching through, is that the kind of like technology for 1954 was super cool with like animatronics here and there, suit actors, model scale cities, model boats that are being filmed this whole time, and like to actually come away with something that like the destruction is something you feel, like the immersion of the whole experience is actually really impressive for what they were doing. So these guys really knew what they were doing when it came to special effects and making their films excellent.
Yeah, and I also think we'll have to talk. We'll discuss this at a later time, but I think you have to give credit to the people who worked on those models and the people who did the special effects.
Absolutely.
Not just Tsuburaya, but his whole team worked really hard, and they worked really hard all through that period of time, even after those films. And a lot of his crew stayed with him, and it's just amazing to me how much time was put into and so much sweat, and just those guys worked really hard. They really did, and they made a great film. And I still think it's one of the best black and white monster movies of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there any sort of what are the characters in this movie, and what's some of the intrigue in some of their? We got the paleontologist.
Yeah, Dr. Yamada.
Yeah, we've got his daughter, or is it somebody else's daughter?
No, it's his daughter.
Yeah,
and then we have the
little love triangle.
A little love triangle, and then there's an orphan that he adopts.
Yeah,
from the island, Odo Island. His entire family was killed by Godzilla. I'm going to spoil this, but it's okay because people might hate us, but it's fine. Later on...
This is your spoiler warning.
Yes, this is my spoiler. This is a spoiler warning.
Pause the podcast here. Go watch it if you want to be unspoiled.
So in 1995, one of the original cast members makes a reappearance. In Godzilla vs. Destroya, there's a reference to Dr. Yamada, and actually they filmed the actual house again and the room that he was in with the Stegosaurus. His adopted son that he adopted from the island is the father of the guy who actually kills Godzilla in the movie.
No way.
Yes. He's the scientist that talks about how do we kill Godzilla, because in that movie, Godzilla is dying already from his heart. His heart is a reactor, essentially, and it's shutting down.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different movie. But anyway, the Emiko
Fun
makes...
fact.
Yes, fun fact.
Fun fact
Emiko
from King
comes
Gozi.
back after 40 years not being in any Godzilla film, and she talks about, and we'll get to this in a second, about the oxygen destroyer.
The oxygen destroyer.
Destroyer, yes.
Tell me about that.
All right, so the oxygen destroyer is basically a new super weapon that Dr. Serizawa has built.
To try to defeat Godzilla.
Yes, but he doesn't want to use it because he's afraid that the other world powers will get a hold of it and use it for military use.
Oh, yeah. There's really no hiding that Godzilla is this direct kind of correlation to Japan's experience with the atomic bomb.
Correct.
Yeah, it's so interesting because literally Godzilla is awakened by these hydrogen bombs.
Correct.
They're saying that he is from the Jurassic period.
He is. He's a terrestrial. He was a sea creature, but then he became terrestrial.
Yeah. So he was hiding in the water, just kind of like has been existing, gets wakened up, and then eventually goes on a destructive rampage through
Correct.
Tokyo, through the city, doing massive damage.
Correct.
Damage. And I think you were telling me about a quote earlier too, where Honda was saying that he didn't want to make Godzilla just like a dinosaur, but he wanted to make him this huge monster to kind of like reenact the damage to the scale that the atomic bombs had.
Yes.
Almost as like a literal reminder of like this kind of can be the consequence of wanting to go to war, of just the danger that can come almost even with like going against nature.
Yeah. No, and it's true because Honda was very much a pacifist. He was drafted into the army and he did not like war. As far as I've done my research, he was very against it. But he had a duty and he fulfilled it. I also think Godzilla was kind of a therapy for him because he dealt with a lot of crazy stuff.
Sure.
I also think for a lot of Japanese audience members, Godzilla was kind of an epiphany. It was another way of therapy for a lot of Japanese people. And I think, Honda was also stationed in a lot of the islands. And I think that kind of developed, it cooked in his head the ideas that he would come out later on. Especially some films that don't get really talked about that much in detail. Mothra especially. There was a lot of the original Mothra movie and Rodan and all that.
Which we'll get to other kaijus,
we'll
kaijus
get
in the
series,
in the genre here.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get those eventually, but first we got to do Godzilla. So
yeah, that's something that really stuck out to me as you're kind of watching the destruction that Godzilla
Sea of Flames.
Yeah, as Godzilla's destroying this city, you're like watching other people observe it.
Yes,
basically
through their eyes. Yes,
and it's just kind of like this crazy. It's just really pretty surreal. Like these are
Very.
massive. I don't know. Massive subliminal messaging. It's
Yeah.
just like massive analogies, metaphors being drawn. And the movie literally ends with them fearing that if they continue advancing their nuclear weapon testing, that more monsters might arise.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's kind of like if we continue on this path, we're going to keep getting haunted.
Yes.
By the monster of our own making, essentially.
Yes, basically. That is the basic premise of the film. Well, the ending at least. I think that's a good evaluation of that film.
And you mentioned it being like a beautiful black and white film. It honestly is a great film. Like
No,
it is. It's really
It
beautiful considering like all the aspects in 1954 to bring this thing together. I think it's got great acting. I think it's got it's a fascinating.
It has a great
plot.
pace too.
It's got a good pacing. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're kind of jumping around all over the place. We see a lot of different kind of scenes and
Yeah.
sequences, but I think as far as where we know Godzilla can go with some of its more goofy.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
Like all things considered, this
Saturday Night Live. Just kidding.
this film is really cool. So I definitely recommend if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, very much
to go
so,
and
yes.
watch it. But is there anything else that our listeners should know about the plot before we wrap up this episode and go to part 3?
I think we should maybe discuss briefly the difference of plot with the American version.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Just briefly.
because it was changed for the American audience.
Correct. So in 1956, they were exporting it to the U.S. by a producer, and I can't remember his name. I'm not going to debauch any more names. The American film industry was on a tirade on nuclear monsters, atomic monsters. Well, when Godzilla was finally released in the U.S., it was heavily edited. The love triangle plot was eliminated.
So sad, man.
Very bad.
Oh, gosh.
A very bad decision on the part of the American dubbing. And they added an American reporter. Basically, he talked over all the Japanese lines because no one was going to dub it. It was too expensive. So Raymond Burr, bless his soul, actually took the movie seriously, and later on when he was in another Godzilla film also took Godzilla seriously, but basically they edited 16 minutes out of the film.
Wow, that's a ton of time.
That is a lot of time for a Godzilla film to be edited, and a lot of the references to the bomb shelters, to tuna, to nuclear, atomic, anything radiation related was removed.
Interesting.
There was a concern that maybe it would be detrimental to Japanese relations.
Interesting.
But it's from a Japanese film company, so I don't understand why they just edited it. Yeah. But again, that's what they decided.
Let us know if you have theories in the comments below.
Yes, please do. Yes, please do. And I also think it was just they didn't want to see a typical, and it wasn't typical. It was a very different movie from the movies that were coming out. Because, who wants to see a giant spider killing people? That's stupid. Who wants to see
all the Lord of the Rings fans just got so mad right now.
Okay, well, they can be mad all they want. Who wants to see a giant ant? I mean, really, and then call them? How about you just call them ants? I really just want to riff on that. But anyway.
Yeah, we'll get off the soapbox, though.
Yeah, we'll get off the soapbox for now. Anyway, but the Raymond Burr cut, as I call it, is not that great. Again, a lot of people have. If you're familiar with the Godzilla series, King of the Monsters is the very first Godzilla film for Americans, and they never got to. A lot of people have not seen the original vision for Honda's vision, and it is Honda's vision, and not until 2004 it was released in America for a limited time. And that at the home release, caught up eventually. We have Blu-rays, we have DVDs. Sony finally released a copy of some Japanese cuts that were not Americanized. So if you really want to do some research and find a good copy, watch the original Godzilla. Go find it. I mean, the Criterion Collection's a good start. It's a little expensive, but I would recommend it.
And that does it for this second installment of the 1954 Godzilla film. And our hats off to Godzilla, King of the Monsters. He's kind of the man.
He is the man.
So thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening once again to this incredible podcast.
Indeed.
We appreciate you guys. We appreciate your support.
Yep.
Feel free to subscribe. And
also leave your comments.
Leave comments. We want to read them.
We want to encourage that.
We want to engage with you guys. We want to hear what you're thinking about our new podcast.
And give us suggestions. We like advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us suggestions. Let us know what type of monsters you want us to cover in the upcoming episodes, and we'll be sure to make sure that we cover those. But guys, until next time, we'll see you later.
Adios.